So there's only so much I can show you here in the gallery, so why don't we go outside and I can show you how I approach a painting on location. Hello again. As you can see, now we're outside to paint a painting on location, and I can show you a little bit about my process and my supplies and the gear that I use, and it'll kind of give you an idea of how I start and finish a painting outside on location. So the first thing I guess I should talk about is my easel. This is called a Gloucester easel, and it's really wonderful because it's practically windproof. So I can go out in just about any weather. I can paint large panels, I can paint small panels, and the wind is not going to affect this. I've had many catastrophes with other easels and wind blowing them over. So this is great for that. And then I bring a palette, a foldable palette. I've made this one myself just out of plywood. Have my paints around the edge, and then there's a lip so I can close it and it'll preserve my paints. I use oil paints, so I have a solvent, and I use Gamsol for my solvent. And then I have a medium that I use, and this one is a Galkin medium, which makes my paints dry a little bit quicker, but any mediums are great. Pretty much a medium is just used to thin your paints and make them more workable. So if you choose to just use oil, a linseed, a safflower, walnut, just any kind of, well, not any kind, but artist grade oils are great as a medium, or you can use any kind of alkyd. It just depends on the effect, the finish, the drying speed. All those things are things to take into consideration when choosing a medium. So I have my solvent, I have my medium, and here are my paints. So with paints, what I try to do on my palette, when you're outside painting, it's really good to try and keep a limited palette, meaning you want one of each of the primaries, or two. Generally I use two of each of the primaries, a warm and a cool version. So I have just titanium white, which is a really great all-purpose opaque mixing white for painting. So I use titanium white. I use a lot of that. I go through that like crazy. Then I have cadmium yellow light, which is it's a cooler yellow. I also have a cadmium orange that I pretty much just use for mixing grays. I don't use a lot of cadmium orange within my paintings. I have a yellow ochre, cadmium red light, alizarin crimson. Then I use for a green, I use a permanent green light. This is a Gamblin permanent green light. And as you can see, it's a very, very bright green. And this green can be taken in lots of different directions. That's why I like it. You can add red and dull it, or you can add yellow and brighten it. Doesn't need to be brightened very often though. White will cool it, blues will cool it, so it can be pushed in lots of different directions. So that's one green that I use. I also have a couple blues on my palette. I have an ultramarine blue, which is pretty much my all-purpose blue I use for mixing. I have a cerulean blue, which is great for skies, like the yellow or greener part of your skies. Cerulean blue is wonderful for that. And I have a cobalt on my palette today, but I don't always use that. You can interchange cobalt and cerulean, really. They're very similar. And then I have a burnt sienna, a viridian, and a cobalt violet. And these I use not as much as the others, but the cobalt violet is especially good for things in the distance. It really helps push things back, cooling things down, so the atmospheric perspective, they can be pushed back in your painting. So that's kind of a general overview of my palette. I have that all written out, and it'll be attached to the notes for this class. And I guess I'll go ahead and get started on my block-in and show you how I start a painting. So just to give you an idea of the kind of thing I look for when I'm kind of scouting a spot for a painting, This scene in particular I really like because I have something leading the eye into the painting. I have this nice water coming in through these grasses, which is just great for me. I love that kind of thing. So I have that water coming in. I have some nice reflections on the water. Then I have this little structure back here. Some trees that create sort of an interesting vertical here. Same on the right-hand side, some little trees. And then I have nice clouds today, which I'll put where I need them for my composition. And then I have some nice atmospheric perspective with that distant shore with the trees in the back, and that's going to create some depth in my painting. So those are all elements that I'm really excited when I find in a scene. So the first thing I do is kind of block in. Sometimes it takes me a while to get just the right composition that I want. I always know it when I get it. I'm happy about it, and I'm excited to get started painting. So I'll go ahead and get started with the block-in. First, I like to think about where I'm going to place that building. Usually the four corners are the most powerful parts of your painting. So I think about that, if that's going to be something interesting. I don't want it to be the main focus necessarily. I don't want it to be a painting about a building necessarily, but I do want it to work within my composition the best way it possibly can. So I'm going to try out up here first. I'm not going to make it very big. And I want to make sure I leave some room for the sky because I do like the sky today. Dark in here, so I want to just make a note of that for now so I can kind of get an idea of what my values are going to be. This is all kind of in a shadow here. I always try to make sure I get the angle of that roof just the way I want it, just the way it is. I hold my brush up against the angle of the roof to make sure I have it accurate. Pretty close. I can always adjust later if it's not quite right. I'm going to try not to get too many little details in this building. I want to keep it pretty. Looks like an osprey or something is overhead. I'm just taking note of where the water is, where the water meets that distant tree line in comparison to my building and where the building lands. These are all little things that contribute to how well your painting reads as something that's occurring in reality. I'm also paying attention to what are my darkest darks in this painting. I have some really dark areas over here, but I also have some dark areas under this building here. So I'm just going to make a note of that. Under this little boardwalk, there's some really dark areas. So I'm going to make those dark in my painting. So I'm going to reserve the very darkest darks for down here in these grasses, because that will make all of this go back in space a little bit, which is what I want. Every now and then I like to stand back and see how it's all working together. I'm thinking maybe I want to move my building over a little bit, in which case I can just wipe out a little section and move it over. I'm just kind of indicating where my values are right now. So all of these grasses are going to be a bit of a darker value. So I'm just making a note of that for myself. I'm going to leave these lighter areas here to indicate where I want that water to go, the water that's reflecting the sky. And that's going to be a nice kind of lead in for my painting. I'm going to keep it transparent, but I'm just going to add a little red, some reds in here to indicate my dark darks. Just because I know there's going to be lots of green in this scene, and I'm going to get my reds in where I can get them in. It's really important. Otherwise, you just have a big green blob on your hands. This red will also set off those greens and make them more vibrant. They become more vibrant, and in a way, I know this is very contradictory, but it calms them a little bit. It's a balance. It's a good balance. so I've just about covered my canvas here, which is what I try to do. I try to get my values and my general colors in as quickly as I can, and then I fine-tune things as I go. I start with bigger brushes and then work my way down to smaller brushes, and towards the end of the painting is when I'll go in and hit some of the darker darks and some of the lighter highlights on things. So I'm kind of 3/4 of the way through, I'd say, and I've gotten some of the reflection of the sky coming down here in the water that I was looking for, hitting some of these reflections of these reeds coming down. I'll go in and address those a little bit more with some darker darks in a little bit, and just kind of like every now and then step back and assess my overall composition and see if I need to catch up any certain areas that are falling behind the painting. I try to keep everything kind of going at the same time. I don't like to work top to bottom or bottom to top or in out. I just kind of try and keep the whole thing unified as much as I can throughout my painting time. So as you can see, I have a lot of green, as we talked about in the beginning. I have a lot of green in this painting. I'm trying to add some reds everywhere I can, some notes of red, some oranges. I'll have to do some more of that just to tame that a little bit. Another thing we can talk about at this stage of the painting is the values that I've recorded here. The building is in the shadows, or at least it was starting in the shadows when I started painting this picture. The sun is starting to creep in, which is kind of an exciting turn of events here. So I might be able to hit some of these little posts with some light as that sun comes around. In the background here I have this line of trees is kind of a purple blue color back here. I could even make that lighter, add some white to that and make that go back in space even more. But I like to keep that purpley blue and lighter just to keep that pushed back, even though it looks quite dark here. Those are all things that I assess as I go along in my painting. Even though this looks dark, I'm going to really try and reserve my darkest darks, like I said, for up here. Because this is where we're standing, this is the foreground. And as we go back in space, things get lighter, bluer, purpler, and less defined. So you're not going to have any sharp edges back here. This is going to be soft edges, and it's going to be kind of a soft, because there's a lot of air between here and there. So all that air has little particles of stuff in it, moisture, dust, all kinds of things. So that makes that sit back in space. So just things to think about. Another thing I'm reminded of is editing while you're painting. This building that I'm painting, this picturesque, beautiful little structure here on the water, is actually a bathroom, and I want to make it look as little like a visitor center tourist bathroom as possible. And I'm kind of going for a look of sort of a beach house, beach shack, beach cabin. So I'm going to keep this boardwalk. There's a boardwalk that kind of snakes around like this. I'm going to keep that out of here. I'm just going to put in the porch and have this porch come out like this and catch some of that light, and have the posts of the porch. And I'm just going to leave it at that, and people can make of it what they will. But I'm not really interested in that boardwalk. It doesn't lend anything to the painting. If I put it coming out this way, it would lead my eye right out of that picture. So I'm going to end it right here, and that'll keep your attention kind of going around like this. And that's what I want. I don't want people leaving the picture too soon. So yeah, editing is very important. And along the lines of editing and designing, if there's something in your scene that is not going to serve your painting, even if it's something really cool, you can just take that thing right out. But you really have to assess each thing you put in your painting, is this going to help my painting, or is it going to distract from what I want, where I want the viewer's attention? There's a flagpole out here in this scene. If I put that flagpole right here, that might be a little bit of an attention grab. I'm not sure I want that. It might actually work well, but the point is, you can leave things out, you can put things in. Sometimes you need that vertical to make the balance of your painting more cohesive. So as you're going along, if something's in there, if you put something in that's not serving the picture, if it's distracting, or if it's it just doesn't work, just take it out. And by doesn't work, I mean doesn't feel right to you. You're the best judge of your painting. So yeah, you're the director, and take in and take out and leave in what you will. One technique I use sometimes to for the distant parts of my painting is I'll take some of the sky color and I'll mix it with some of the color of this distant shore, and then I'll just kind of lay some of that in, and that actually does a really good job of blending those two areas. Not blending, blending's not the right word, but making it a little more cohesive, making it look correct and tie together a little bit better. As you saw before, I painted this same scene in the early spring, and it was blustery and cold and things hadn't greened up yet, so it's really quite different today. Also, the tide was out, which makes a big difference because we didn't have all these waters coming up through these grasses, which is really key to this great scene here. So yeah, the time of year and time of day, it all impacts how your scene is going to look, which is a wonderful thing, because if you found a great spot, that means you can go back lots and lots of different times and get a completely different scene every time. So this is where I'm going to stop for the day. I'm pretty happy with the composition and with the lighting in this picture. I brought some light into the clouds up here. The sky changed quite a bit as I was painting, and some of the changes I really liked, so I incorporated them into my painting. The reflections in the water, I always have to kind of mirror the sky a little bit as I do that, so that kind of changed as I went along also. I got some of the details in the grasses and some of the detail on the pillars here on the building, and a few little things in here. but I don't get a lot of detail. I like to keep it pretty simple. Big, simple shapes, simple set of values. And I think that creates a stronger painting when you keep things simple and edit and keep your shapes to your big shapes to a minimum. It makes a bolder, stronger painting. This has been a real joy for me to do this class, and I want to thank the Arts Council of St. Mary's County and thank North End Gallery and the town of Leonardtown. This has been a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so happy to be able to share this wonderful pastime, way of expressing yourself, way of creating art. And I hope that it inspires a lot of you to give it a try, because it's a true joy. To see more of my work and more of what I'm up to, you can follow me on Instagram at Pleinal, P-L-E-I-N-A-L, or you can look up my website, which is Alison, A-L-I-S-O-N -Barry, B-A-R-R-Y.com. Thanks for watching.